are reading through God's Word together. Again, we're reading through the Bible in the course of 2 years. This past week, we had a wide variety of readings from Nehemiah, from Esther, and from Job. We finished up that book of Nehemiah. Nehemiah is a faithful layperson. He's not a clergyman, not a scribe, not a priest. He is a faithful, skilled lay leader. We give thanks to God for Nehemiah, and we give thanks to God for all the Nehemiahs around here at Ascension and other churches too, who use the gifts that God has blessed them with in service to his church. The book of Esther, just from comments about that, boy, what a story, and a true story. The interesting thing, among other things, about the book of Esther is that God's name is mentioned 0 times in the book. And even though God's name isn't mentioned, that doesn't mean we don't see God at work. We see God at work mightily in Esther's life. Just briefly to sort of recap that account, it's during a time that is late in the Old Testament. It's during this time when the people of Israel had been taken off into Babylon, including Esther's family. And now, at this point, the Babylonians aren't in power, the Persians are in power. And Azarias is the king, or better known by his Greek name, Xerxes. And long story short, again, chooses Esther to be his new wife. Esther has been raised by Mordecai, one of her family members. And there's another person in this whole plot, that's Haman. Haman is out to get the Jews. He knows that Mordecai is a Jew. He doesn't like Mordecai and his lack of respect. So he's out to kill all the Jews. Well, Mordecai gets word of this. He asks Esther to come and to speak to the king. And Esther agrees to do so. Even though it might cost her own life. Even as queen, still, you can't come to the king's presence unless he invites you. Famous line from Mordecai, he says, who knows, maybe God put you there for a time such as this. And I think that's good for each one of us to remember too, that wherever we're placed in our lives, whatever vocations we have, whether big or small, whether we think we're important or unimportant, God has placed us at this place and this time in the world's history for a purpose, just as he put Esther there for a purpose. And so it works through Esther to save the people of Israel, the Jews. Haman is put to death, and Mordecai is actually elevated in power there in the Persian Empire. So we see God working through Esther in a powerful way. And again, Esther's faith is pretty remarkable too, that she is willing to do that. Esther says in chapter 4, she says, I will go to the king, though it is even against the law, and if I perish, I will perish. She's willing to make that possible sacrifice to save her people. I think there might be kind of a connection of foreshadowing to Jesus, that he perishes for the sake of people, for us. He didn't just risk being perished, he actually did perish. He did die on the cross. Book of Job. We just got started with that. I won't comment on it too much. I will do that more next week. But just as you read through the book of Job, know that when you hear Job's friends talk to him in his suffering and give advice, know that their advice is pretty crummy, okay? It's pretty lousy, their advice. So don't think of that as what we should follow in our sufferings. We'll talk about that more next week. God's blessings on your study of God's Word. May it bless you richly, and may you grow in faith and love toward your Lord through that study of His precious holy Word.